Welcome, everybody, to Influential Conversations for Accountants podcast/webinar series, part 6, brought to you by Reframe 2024. We are putting the links to the slides down in the bottom. So if you want to download the slides, follow along, you can do that, even though everything's going to be on the screen. Let's discuss really quick what today's topics are. So we'll spend a few minutes just talking about the webinar and podcast series in case you're listening to this for the first time, and we'll talk about the Reframe conference once again. We'll discuss the Accounting Reframers Manifesto. We cover this on every episode, and we're recently rebranding that from the Alt Accountant Manifesto to the Reframers Manifesto, and this will give Robbie good insight into what we are trying to do here as accountants, reframing the profession. Then we'll do a quick introduction on Robbie, our guest today. And then we'll get right into the contents of her 2 books. We're going to be discussing the membership economy, the subscription business model, the forever transaction, which is kind of her brand, her specific call out. Yeah, the forever transaction, the forever promise. We're going to deep dive into that because I love that. And we're going to then kind of discuss how this applies to accounting, how accounting professionals, accounting firms can start looking at these ideas and see how they can implement it, and then we'll just have open discussion about maybe the live questions that come in through the audience. So let's get right to it. This webinar podcast series is for accounting professionals, enrolled agents, bookkeepers, QuickBooks Pro advisors, small business accounting advisors looking to significantly improve firm communication strategy, to have more influential conversations with their clients, looking to develop their team through richer and more meaningful conversations, looking to improve personal communication skills, to bring less anxiety to and from work in their personal lives. And folks that are joining us in October in Hollywood for Reframe 2024 or considering coming along. Just a quick reminder, we have about 120 people signed up so far. We have a cap of 200, so we're very, very close to that sellout point. Last year we were about this point, and about a month before the conference we were sold out already. So it's October 16th and 19th in Hollywood, Florida. Ticket price is $1,800. The early bird that exists now is $200 off. You use the coupon code 0731 that's on the screen, reframe2024.com. Robbie will not be in this year's conference, but we'll start talking to her about bringing her next year, that sort of thing. So that's why we wanted to start this relationship with the Reframe community. So the Accounting Reframers Manifesto. So we're rebranding from the Alt Accountants Manifesto to the Reframers Manifesto. And Robbie, this will be the first time you'll be looking at this. So this is a set of commitments that an accounting reframer needs to put together if they believe what we believe. So Carlos and I believe that the accounting profession needs to be reframed to be sought after as the most creative, forward-looking, and innovative of all professions, which is kind of the opposite of where we stand now. So that's what we're trying to do. So in order to do that, we must practice what we preach. We must be uniquely positioned to help our target customers that we choose. You can only choose your clients if you're positioned to choose your clients. If you're not positioned, you're just going to get whatever clients come your way. You need to be known, or we need to be known as experts or authority in our area of specialty. So those 2 things are calling out to specialization, to being experts in the subject matter, not being generalists anymore. We use transformational language and ask better questions. It all alludes to the value creation business model and having value conversations and focusing on how we create value and permanent transformations for our clients. And we need to start changing that language, okay? And through those conversations, we need to listen to our clients to understand why. Why do they have that problem? Not just what the problem is, why do they have that problem? And understand what is your client's desired future state. We price our services at a fraction of the value we provide, and that's highlighted because those are the topics that we're going to be discussing today. And we give our customers choices on how they can work with us, including not working with us. And we'll discuss how important it is to have that unsubscribe button very, very, very obvious, because Robbie makes a really big deal about this in the books, and I absolutely love that. We are effective, even if it means being inefficient. So inefficiency is something that the accounting profession has stayed away from for a very long time. And that's how we are what we are. We're hyper efficient, but not very effective at transforming our clients. And that's where we are now with tons of burnout, with talent crisis, with clients undervaluing us, with AI at the verge of taking over the work that we do. So many things that we have basically propped up our profession to be that we need to change. We should be automating workflows 100%, but we always humanize relationships. It's a really important distinction there. We automate workflows, humanize relationships. We create a firm culture that attracts partner-like talent. We are agents of change through courage, conviction, and compassion. That means that we tell our clients the truth and we're transparent, and we also need to be highly empathetic. We have to show empathy. We make hard decisions with confidence. Confidence is a big word in my world. It's a big ethos of our firm. Like, we believe that we don't sell accounting services. We don't sell tax returns. We give people confidence. And from there, everything else stems forward. And lastly, we will rebrand our profession and save it from itself, because we have dug ourselves into this hole that we need to dig ourselves out of. So that's the Accounting Reframers Manifesto, Robbie. I would love to know your thoughts about that. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I love it. It very much aligns with the way that I see the world and the kinds of businesses that I choose to work with. Your emphasis on value-based pricing, your courage. Courage is an important word for me too. I was meeting with a client this week, and they told me in their pre-work that they're, quote, lucky that they appeal to all people. And I was like, that is not lucky. That is a problem. And then we talked about it, and they said, actually, what you're asking us to do is be brave and say we're not for everybody, and be brave and say, this is who we are really effective for. And I think that can feel really scary, but we know, you guys know, I know that the more focused you are, being an authority in your area of specialty, allows you to attract the right customers. It also allows you to attract the right employees. And both of those things lead to, virtuous cycles that attract more of the right kind of people to allow you to do your specialized work more effectively. So, I think this looks great.
Thank you so much, Robbie. So let me introduce you. Robbie is an author, speaker, consultant, help company leverage the subscription business models, digital communities, and freemium strategies. And there's many things, but we took that as an expert from her website. Author of 2 books that I read and I loved, The Membership Economy and The Forever Transaction. Host of the Subscription Stories podcast, which it's both a really good companion to the books and also sort of a permanent update, because it's really, one of the things that authors fear the most is writing great seminal work, but then 10 years later, because these books talk about examples that maybe we forgot because they were pre-pandemic or whatever, but although Forever Transaction was published in 2020, but so many things have changed in the past couple of years, and I would love to ask you, we'll get to that, Robbie, in terms of if you were writing an updated edition, what things would you change or update? So we'll get to that. Also developed 9 video courses in LinkedIn Learning. So if you're a member of LinkedIn Learning, just look up Robbie. And was recently awarded the 2024 Sub Summit Impact Award. And I saw some videos on that. So congratulations on that, Robbie. Did I miss anything?
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. That's a great start.
Good. I'm going to give ChatGPT a raise because it did a really good job summarizing that. All right. So I'm going to give you my synopsis of the 2 books, Robbie, and then I'll let you fill in the gap here. So The Membership Economy is sort of a eye-opening book that kind of discusses how much more ubiquitous the membership and subscription business model is. Like, we all know that there's tons of companies that charge per subscription, but many of us don't realize how many companies pivoted from something that was working, that was profitable, that seemed to be the way it's going to work forever, and made the courageous and brave decision to pivot. And that pivot potentially saved them. And a great example is Blockbuster didn't make the pivot, and Netflix ate them. And there's examples like that in the book. There's tons of them, and they're great. So this is a great inspiration book to sort of get a deep understanding of what's happening in the overall global markets in terms of the shift, not just to subscription, but that sense of membership that your subscribed customers have. And then the Forever transaction, which I'm going to make the assumption this came more from all the implementation work that you did. And it's like, okay, this is what it looks like to transition an existing business into a subscription business model. And the one thing that I like a lot about this book, especially the specific wording and language you use, the customer's making a commitment to you to transact with you forever, or they're making one transaction today and having a forever commitment. In exchange, you have to give them a forever promise. And I think those two things sometimes are not looked at and studied and planned and strategized around, because unfortunately, most of the information that we get about business model changes, whether it's the subscription business model or the value-based pricing business model or productization, most of it is really focused about the benefits to you as a firm, how much more money you're going to make and how much more predictable revenue you're going to have and how much higher valuations as a company you're going to have. But they don't discuss the other side, which is your client is making a forever commitment to be in a forever transaction. And the forever promise basically is what we used to call the value proposition, but it's no longer a value proposition. It's a constant transformation and constant value creation and constant improvement, a promise. So with that, you want to bridge the gap on my introduction and add anything else, Robbie, that you would like to?
Yeah, you did a great job. For me, I wrote The Membership Economy. I wrote it in 2014 after working in the subscription space for, a good, almost by the time I came out, like almost 15 years already of working with subscription businesses, and being baffled that organizations weren't seeing what I was seeing, the power of subscription pricing, a membership mindset. This was my £1 business card. This was my manifesto. This was, membership is powerful. Here's a whole bunch of examples. Here's how it might work in your organization. If this sounds good to you, maybe let's talk and explore how it can work for your organization. And if not, let's not waste each other's time. And then, even 5 years later, so, when Forever Transaction came out, I didn't have to explain to people anymore the power of subscriptions. Everybody was doing subscriptions by then, or trying to. I have a pretty high level of confidence that if I walk into any company, pretty much anywhere in the world, they have had at least one conversation as a leadership team about subscription pricing. But the problem is making it work. And as you pointed out, Hector, it's not just about making it work at the moment of transaction when they sign up for the subscription. It's about engaging them and expanding the relationship over time and retaining them. And that's what the Forever as you said, Forever Transaction, very tactical book. If you believe what I was saying in Membership Economy and that resonates with you, this is how to do it. This is how to figure out who your ideal member is. This is how to figure out their journey. This is how to design your offering. This is how to adjust it when it invariably is no longer enjoying product market fit. And so, those are the two different books. And as you said, the podcast that I do, the tagline is True Tales from the Trenches. So it's just stories that are emerging day by day in this space.
That's great. Robbie, I had a question about knowing that you've worked with vast different levels of industries and sizes of these organizations. When it comes to the difference between, I guess, your observations in working with large organizations, and then how do we scale this down to a small firm owner, a solopreneur that wants to go from this maybe hourly to fixed pricing to then membership/subscription model? What observations do you have to share or tips or advice?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the companies I mostly featured in the books are, big companies or even, closely held family businesses that are in the, tens of millions of ARR, hundreds of millions, bigger businesses. But these principles work for solopreneurs. These businesses can work for, a nail salon, certainly are already working. I've seen many accounting firms, many law firms adopting some of these principles because it's about aligning your outcomes with, your customers' outcomes with your outcomes. I make money as long as you're getting good advice, and your business is, even more than getting good advice, you're able to use that advice to get the goals, to achieve the goals that you have. So it implies, sort of understanding where the customer's going. But the principles are very basic, and they're things that any individual, including, my teenage kids thinking about babysitting or, mother's helper work, they can use those same principles to build a differentiated business.
Great, Robbie. Robbie, question. I wanted to ask you about what is the Forever Promise, but prior to that, just a follow-up question to Carlos's. Have you worked with professional services organizations that are very labor intensive? Because we understand how the hybrid between the product, and the service around the product, but it is that solely highly labor intensive professional firms. That's the nut that we're trying to crack here.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, my dad's a lawyer, so I've grown up in law firms, and my first client was Netflix. My second client was QuickBooks, or it was PayCycle, part of Intuit's QuickBooks, and focused on how do you simplify payroll and how do you manage those things. So it's an accountant's helper as well, and I have clients. I work with bigger companies, but I also have these jump starts where I'll work with a solopreneur, a very small business, to help them put a laser focus on the model. What I see that's different when it's professional services, when there are, real variable costs, is how I think about it. So it's actually the same issues that like a wine subscription faces in some ways, because, if you send out wine as a free sample, like you don't ever get that back. Whereas if I give you access to my content, I've already spent the money on the content. So even though there's maybe there might be, an opportunity cost, it's, it doesn't actually come out of my pocket. What I would say, so I've worked with law firms, I've worked with lots of hospital systems, individual solo practitioners in professional development, lots of advisory services, lots of consulting firms. And, the challenges there, I think the biggest challenge is managing the upside, or the downside, whatever it is, the projects, the big problems, right? In healthcare, it's, what if the person gets really sick? Are we covering all of that? Or are we just calling their well care? If it's, in law firms, are we just covering, the monthly check-ins and reviews and, those kinds of things? Or are we taking responsibility if they actually need us for a major transaction or major issue? And so one of the things that I see is that the subscription, you have to be clear on what the role of the subscription is. Is a subscription, all inclusive, or is a subscription a steady drumbeat to keep the relationship alive? So for example, Bain and Company, big consulting firm, obviously have very high variable costs, very expensive employees. What they have done is they've introduced they call it the Net Promoter, NPS, you're probably familiar with, the NPS Loyalty Forum. And this is the subscription-based offering that they have alongside their, traditional project-based consulting services. The only members who can join are the number one customer-facing employee in the organization. So that would be like the head of retail, the head of customer support or customer success or post-sales interactions. And they meet and they share expert advice, and they build community and trust and support, and the different members share their own stories. The members pay to belong. So there is a source of revenue, although I think it's pretty close to break even. But what's really interesting to me is that subscription is a way of keeping buyers engaged, so that when the time comes for them to buy a big project, when they need a big project, this organization is front of mind, and there's a lot of trust there. So that's another way of thinking about it. So other organizations would say, no, we have a subscription and it's more like a retainer and it's all inclusive, right? That's riskier. But if you understand the usage behaviors, you can usually balance it out, much in the way that like if you've ever been to like an all-you-can-eat buffet, right? There's somebody in line that's going straight for the caviar, and there's somebody who's like trying to gain weight for their, football team or whatever, who's going to eat everything on the table. And then there's a bunch of people that are just going to have a small portion, and somehow that evens out. And that's because the organization understands the population that's coming through. And so they can price with a level of confidence that absorbs those outliers. But you have to understand your customer base really well in order to do that kind of all you can eat, all inclusive pricing that, a lot of people really aspire to.
Right. And this is where specialization comes in handy, because the more you specialize, the better you know your customer, and the better you can potentially predict the behavior or the needs, and the more personalized scope for that particular industry or niche you can build, right?
Yeah, exactly. You understand them better. Yeah, so you can charge them more thoughtfully, and you understand better what it's going to cost to serve them.
Awesome. Now, can you explain to us what is the Forever Promise?
The Forever Promise is the promise that the organization is making to their subscriber or their member in exchange for that loyalty that you talked about in the introduction. It's usually outcome related. I'm going to help you solve an ongoing problem or achieve an ongoing goal in exchange for your trust. It justifies that forever transaction. If you want subscription revenue, if you want predictable revenue, there's got to be an underlying promise there that is meaningful to the customer that would justify that relationship.
Now, do you believe the Forever Promise is like a statement, like a manifesto that needs to be like on your website, or only discussed at time of purchase? Like, how is the Forever Promise used in your communications?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, something that's a little different than, the brand promise, which a lot of people talk about, is this is what your customers say about you. That's usually how you can figure out what it is. I always go to the Apple store because I know whatever technical issue I have, they'll have the product and they'll all work together seamlessly. It's a little more expensive, but it's totally worth it to me. That's what people say about Apple, and that's what Apple continues to double down on, right? We're going to make it easy. As long as you commit to us, right? There's a big caveat. We'll make sure everything works seamlessly. In terms of where you put that in your marketing materials, it basically gets slotted in everywhere, right? It's in the acquisition materials, of course. We're gonna help you get and stay healthy. We're going to help you, protect the business that you are growing. We worry about the downside so you don't have to. We're going to help you understand how your business works, so that you can make better decisions every day. Whatever that promise is, you put it in at the front, and you also want to get really clear on what's not included in your promise. Then as you get through, where I think the Forever Promise continues to be important is when you're designing product, when you're designing the actual offerings you have, there's the pain point or the opportunity that brings the customer to you for the first time. But then there's the question of why would they continue to stay once that's been resolved, right? And an organization that's clear on their Forever Promise is designing the offering, not just for acquisition, but also for engagement over time. A lot of businesses overinvest in getting the customer, but they don't actually keep the customer because they don't have a lot of value to provide in between those big occasions where, there's project work.
Robbie, I'm curious about, I think like one of the biggest fears of people wanting to move to subscription, and Hector might cover this a little later, but I think about like, all right, if I go into this fixed model, two things. One is the fear of like the not included items that end up showing up a lot inside that. And then what does that conversation need to look like? And how do you help people pivot? And then the other thing I think about is their business being left on the table because this model is now sort of, this is the only revenue stream that we have now. And in accounting, for example, one of the biggest projects that accountants tend to do is help folks catch up with their books, right? A business owner has not been doing their books for 5-10 years, and they have to do these big catch up projects. And so, like, how do you help differentiate, like, not to leave things on the table? And then the other thing, which is how do you address the not included things with clients and within the business model?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the first thing that you brought up, which is I'm afraid that I'm going to get stuck with expenses that, with needs that they ask for that cost me a lot to deliver. And what I always suggest is, either look at past data of how people, like, this is a customer that uses us, a client that's used us really well over the last 5 years. What does that look like? Where, how many hours, how much intensity, how often are there spikes? Are they seasonal? Are they predictable? So that you understand what that rhythm might look like. That's a starting point. Second thing that you want to do is say, is that likely to change if this was an all-inclusive offering? So for example, if I have a restaurant, right, and you have to order, a la carte, right? I might see, oh, well, most people come in and they either get an appetizer and a main or a main and a dessert. And some people come in and just get the main. Well, if I make it all inclusive, there's a risk that everybody's going to say appetizer, main, dessert, and I'm going to, end up spending too much. What you do there is you try it in a very small audience so that you can get smart on behavior, right? So you say, okay, we're just going to take a small fraction of people. We're going to take 10 people or 3 people, and we're going to give them unlimited and see if, and all we're trying to learn from that experiment is how does their behavior change when it's all you can eat or when all these things are included. And then the question of, and what if you put something out there and you realize you made a mistake and you're too generous? There's a couple of, either you're too generous or they feel like you're being stingy. Like, I thought that you said this was everything, but it doesn't include, my 5 years of updating. You want to be really clear up front, right? That's the first thing. Second thing is, if you make a mistake, especially in the professional services, I think it can often work to say, you know what? I was experimenting with this. I made a mistake. I want to show you how much this is costing our team. And I want to talk to you about whether you're open to making some adjustments. And what I've found, both in my personal experience as a consultant, because that's how I make a living, right? I'm helping these companies. I've made mistakes with my own subscription or membership where I'm like, oh man, this is not what I expected, but I didn't actually write it in the description. I'll just say, look, I made a mistake, and we can stop working right now because I'm not going to go ahead with this. Or we can make an adjustment. And usually I've found that because the relationship is so intimate and so trust-based, there is a way to walk it back a little bit. But of course you don't want to get there. So, I always encourage people, keep it small and figure out, like, another really great tactic, if you're thinking about this, is to write down all the things you're worried about and all the things you don't know that make you feel like this is very risky. And then for each one of those, try to figure out which ones, how do you mitigate risk on each of those items, and which ones can you do without launching a product? So for example, on a pricing, like, I don't know, I'm going to offer, for $5,000 a month, you get the following services, right? Well, before you even, one of the questions is, will people sign up for it, right? So that you can do by just putting it in front of people and seeing if they click buy or if they say, I'm interested in that. But if you want to see the behavior once they actually have it, you do have to let people really use it. And, you can kind of start to break down. And then if you say, well, what happens if they overspend? Then I say, well, how would you protect yourself? Well, these are the three areas in hindsight. These are the 3 most expensive things I do. I'm going to make sure up front that it's clear that those are not included. When you launch a subscription, like I said before, you want to think about, what is this subscription model doing for you? Is it about having some predictable cash flow? Is it about giving your best customers a higher level of service? Is it about an easy way of entry for your newest customers? Is it that steady drumbeat that Bain & Company is using it for, where you don't really even care about making money? You just want to stay connected with customers between big transactions. The clearer you are on that, the clearer you can make your offer and the better you can protect yourself. You can go low at the beginning. I've seen companies price things really low. That's usually when they have very low variable costs or no variable costs. And they just want to get it out there and see what happens and learn and get a footprint and get there first. That's what like Spotify does. A lot of consumer products do this. But the other side that I've seen in the professional services space is price it high. So that only the people who are doing it for the convenience or the personalization, but they're paying pretty much every penny or a little bit more. And then over time, as you're more confident in that usage pattern, you can lower your price and appeal to the core, your core customer base.
That's awesome, Robbie. Robbie, I'm gonna propose reframing some part of the conversation that was earlier, and the overarching principle was we're afraid that too many people might use too many of the services, and we may price incorrectly or have a capacity issue. What would you think about, especially for the accounting industry, if we reframe it as we kind of want them to use all these services? You know, maybe this is the reason why accountants are becoming irrelevant, is because, you know, customers are afraid to ask the accountants more questions. They're afraid to maximize the value they can, you know, sponge out or wring out of their accountant because they're so worried about the nickel or diming or paying for something they don't need. But is there a universe where we kind of want people to use every single possible service and giving them exposure to that, making them a better business owner, making them better decision makers? Is there a universe where that could work and we're no longer just trying to avoid risk or mitigate risk? If you don't mind me, you know, just being devil's advocate for a second on that.
No, this is great. I'm glad you asked, because like in my mind, again, the goal, you start, if you're creating a subscription for your community, like let's say that some of the people in the audience are just thinking about this, you know, you're thinking about it, you're saying, okay, well, who do I want to design this for? And what is the outcome for them? And what is the outcome for me? Right? You're talking about the outcome for them. The outcome for them is I want them to make better decisions to grow their business. I want them to understand better the operations of their business and how the money comes in and goes out. And I want them to be able to better anticipate what's going to happen so that they can be more thoughtful about their strategies and their operations, right? And so, you know, a good model is, you know, many of you probably have, you know, a sibling or, you know, a good friend who sort of calls you whenever they need to, right? The same way that like if you have a doctor in the family, you just sort of call like, oh, I just had this question, I'm a little worried. And you know that those people are getting better care. And they're able to make better decisions. Trying to figure out what that would feel like what is it that you're willing to do for a family member? And what is it that you would do if somebody came in here, again, you can design any number of subscriptions, but the subscription you're talking about is the person who comes in, who fits your ideal profile, who's in your sweet spot and says, you're really good. I don't really know what all you can do for me, but I want the works. Right? Tell me what you can do to make me better and give me a fair price. I trust you. Right? That's a way to think about the membership. That can be really useful, right? I trust you. Do what's right for me. I price fixed price because I don't ever want there to be a meter running with my clients, right? I'm here by the month. When I'm working with you, unlimited questions. And by the way, that encourages you to be focused on working on the business when you're working with me so that you get your money's worth, right? I think what you're talking about is if somebody's thinking about what kind of subscription should we introduce, which is often a question that a company will have, is like, we know we need something with subscription, but there's a lot of different ways it could work. It could be for our best customers, it could be for our newest customers, it could be that steady drumbeat. You know, there's a lot of different ways, or it could be for a very specific segment that has really quirky needs. Look at each one of those, right? 4 different options. Think about what you would do. Think about what would need to be in there for you to really be delivering on the promise that would bring them to you for this kind of a relationship. And then from there, you can say, okay, which one of these makes the most sense for my business?
Robbie, thank you very much for that. I think you gave me a piece of language I was looking for, which is that is the forever promise, essentially is getting to the point where clients go, wow, I like working with you so much. I wonder what else you can do for me. Like getting the clients to say, shut up and take my money, just offer things, right? And we're usually so bad at that. We're so good at like scoping everything out and productizing every single thing as its own separate deliverable that we do in steps and we put into our calendar and we capacity plan. But we as a profession, we're so bad at just how do we throw everything at the kitchen sink so our clients go, wow, what else can you do for us? Because that's going to give you the courage and it's going to give you the fuel for you to experiment and start really taking your firm to the next level.
Right. And it's great for your customers because you can say to them, for example, I only work with companies that value, that want to grow really fast. And when you want to grow really fast, there's a lot of techniques and tactics that I can help you with. And I want us to have a real partnership. So you can call me as often as you want. Again, think about that best case, the customer who trusts you, who knows you and says, just give me the works because whatever I'm spending on you is a tiny fraction, as you pointed out in your initial slide, tiny fraction of the value you're creating for me. That's a great place to start. The other place to start is what's the bare minimum that someone should have? Like what if my brother were starting a business and said, money's really tight, but I know I probably need accounting. What is the minimum that I should have if I were being a responsible business owner, right? That could be a subscription offer, right? You say, look, you just at least need somebody to look at your books once a year or twice a year. That's going to be a subscription. Like, don't worry about it. I'll come to you. I'll make sure that you're whatever in compliance, that, you don't get behind. That's the minimum. Maximum is like, I'm going to help you with your strategy. I'm going to understand where you're taking the business. Maybe I'll be on your board or I'll sit in on your board meetings. And then, there's obviously paths in between, but I'm a big fan of starting on the edge cases.
True. One minimum could be, let me just be there for you to dispel all the bad tax advice that's on the web. Because most of the time, I believe, especially startup business owners, their baseline is the free information they get out there that's not nuanced, that is not personalized. All these tax gurus are giving just random tax advice. So the bare minimum is I could just be here to make sure that you have a good understanding of how the tax system works, how regulations work, how, with the basic things you need to know as a business owner. And that could be the baseline. That could be the Costco membership, right? Like that gets you in the door. Everything else you can buy from there. So I love the idea of just figuring out bare minimums for that.
Right. And you want to, when you're designing the offering, you want to think about what's hard. Here's another question to help you design your offering. What's hard about being an accounting client today? Like if you were talking to your clients and you said, what is hard about it? Well, I only go to them when the problem is big enough that I notice it. And then they're always all worked up because they said, you should have come to me 3 months ago or a year ago or 5 years ago. Right. So how do I help them with that? Or, they tried to cheap out and they took some advice from the web and they didn't quite understand it. And now I have to unravel it, which is expensive for them and so disappointing and not fun for me. Right. Because I don't want to clean up a mess. I'll do it, but I'd rather help them optimize and do things right in the first place. So thinking about that, is really helpful for designing the offer and also for designing the communication. So for example, when you're a member of, Robbie's Accounting Services, you can call and ask and, send me any content that you see on the web that you have a question about and I'll answer it. And by the way, if you're focused and you have a key market segment, and you're taking these questions, what happens is, the first time you answer it, you have to do it. The second time you answer it, maybe you just, you can take what you answered the first time and just edit a little bit. By the third time, you have a fixed answer, right? And it becomes a document, it becomes a video, it becomes something that you send out in your newsletters. But over time, you can really scale this piece of your business, this, responding to emerging changes or responding to, dishonest or oversimplifying web gurus. Right. I see this note that Rachel wrote, keeping up to date regularly is cheaper than catching up. I would lean into that. I would put that on the homepage, right? Keeping up is cheaper than catching up, and way less stressful, right? And then you
Wow.
show it. You can, right? You can show it visually, right? This is a client who showed up that had to catch up, and this is what it cost, and this is how many hours, and this is how many sleepless nights they had before they called me, and this is keeping up, right?
Huge.
Yeah,
Robbie, earlier
skywriting is fine, Rachel. It's totally fine. I love skywriting.
something you mentioned earlier, it's about, how do you build this partnership with these clients? And I'm sure that the chat will fire up when I say this, that sometimes clients are not so fun to work with, right? Like they don't respond. They don't upload the documents on time. They call you. Everything is last minute and urgent. And it's tough to fire a client already. That is already an emotional journey. But as I think about like the upfront contract of, and Ed had a question on the Q&A here, which is like the cancel button goes both ways, right? So if the offer's not working, we can back out. How does that get addressed? I mean, beyond the not included, I'm just curious to see if there's more that you can share on that.
So one thing that I would advise is when you're signing that subscription agreement, you might have a section on shared agreements. I will not bring things up at the last minute. I will raise them as soon as they come to mind for me. I'll respond just the same way that I expect my accountant to respond to me in the same business day or within 24 hours or whatever. I will do my best to be equally responsive. And having that there is just a gentle reminder that this is a peer relationship. I'm not your servant. I'm your advisor, and we have a trusted relationship. So that's one thing. And then you can always refer back to it. A second thing is that the subscription itself can be based on, non-urgent. So anything that a subscription client asks for, we will respond or handle it within the week, right? Or within the month or whatever. You can probably be more elegant and more precise, but you can be clear about, because another reason that people use subscription is to manage spikiness, right? So like you think about a gym, they'll often have a membership that only allows you to go between, 9 and 11:30 and 2 and 5:30, right? And weekends, because those are the times that the people who are willing to pay a premium don't usually go, and the gyms are usually empty at those times. So you can also think about that. So you brought up a couple of different issues. One of them is a disrespectful client. Another one is urgent, and managing spikes. And I think, back to that list of these are the things I worry about. Each one, the more precise you can be about the issue, the easier it is to either build it into the offering or raise it up front so that if it arises, you can hark back to that conversation or that contract and say, this is how we work.
Yeah. And this ties so perfectly towards what this year's conference is themed on for us, which is called Influential Conversations for Accountants, which requires a conversation when these things happen. And I've noticed that you've been using really solid language to help define what some of these things mean, but where it's easy for the client to be able to digest. So I guess my question to you is like, what are some examples of strong language that needs to be used to help really transition into this model smoothly?
The language, and I saw there was a slide that came through. I don't know if you want to answer. Membership for me is the mindset. If your firm has a membership mindset, that means we know the people we serve. It is not transactional. We are in it for the long term with them. Membership mindset. We are customer centric. We're thinking about their journey and we're optimizing around that, as opposed to we have our products. We do an audit. We do a catch up. We do these specific things. Here's our menu of what it is. Subscription is a pricing decision. It's a recurring revenue. It's a contract. Every month you pay this, you get that, and it happens automatically. Some people think about membership or a membership as like the Costco thing, which is the Costco membership gives you permission and more value to buy inside the store. But a Costco membership without you actually buying stuff from Costco is worthless. right? The membership is about discounts and it's about preferential treatment and it's about, a guarantee of a certain kind of product. Amazon Prime membership, you can still, be an Amazon customer without it, but, most of their benefits only accrue if you're already using them. But what they also have is audio and video content and storage content, which is, more like a subscription. So there's sort of different ways of thinking about what it is. Membership also often implies community. So, I know of an accounting, practice in Australia that I've worked with, talked to. They have very focused areas that they serve. And then what ends up happening is because all of their customers are in the same narrow niche, they actually bring them together under their umbrella. And that community becomes like the most valuable part of working with that firm, right? It's kind of like the Bain loyalty forum, right? Under the umbrella, we're all clients. We have a lot of the same issues. We share information facilitated by the organization. That's often a big value of a good membership organization.
So I have a follow-up question to Carlos's question, which is the language change and what kind of work we need to do to prepare prior to an implementation. I hear you loud and clear. I think the most important thing is to change the mindset that they're not clients, that they're members. And I think if you change the mindset from client to member, everything the word client brings with it, all the baggage that it brings, whether it's hourly and retainers and, and the way that the lawyers treat a lot of clients and the transactional approach to client, to traditional practices working with clients, for lack of a better term. If you change it to member, then you think of it differently. You think of them as a family member or a team member or a community member, and your relationship with your customers change. I mean, because you change the word,
language,
right? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Language. I was just going to say, language is so important. But I think people talk about membership. Even if you guys do nothing else and don't change your pricing and don't change your offerings, and you just start using language of member internally, or start treating your clients like members, you'll see a change, right? For example, you don't take everybody who walks in the front door because you're only working with people who have the goals that you have, that are there for the long term, that don't want to clean up messes, but rather they want to make sure the messes don't happen. That are more proactive rather than reactive, who see that understanding their financials is a tool to better strategy, right? And so it helps you, up front, telling them, look, we're only interested in working with people who are planning to stay for a while. So we don't, if you're really bold, you say, so we don't do audits, we only do annual, or whatever. It can really change how you see everything. Apple waited a very long time before they introduced any kind of subscription pricing or membership language in the stores. But from the very beginning, they had a membership mindset. We know that people find managing their technology footprint really complicated. Stuff doesn't just work together. Like, that's my husband's favorite line. Like, it should just work, right? And it doesn't. But with the Apple stuff, it does. And that has nothing to do with subscription pricing, and everything to do with the language they use and the way they see their relationship with the people they serve.
And I want to just read this out loud, a comment from live webinar attendees. It says, membership has its privileges. We don't offer services, we have privileges. And this is the distinction. Mm-hmm. We offer services to clients, and we give access and privileges to members. And that's the language shift. That's it, right?
Yeah. I think that the language is super important. And, having that discussion of, and I have this in my book, what does a product-centric organization look like? What does a member-centric organization look like? Do we know our ideal member? Do we understand the journey they're on? Do we understand what brought their outcomes, where we can help? Where can we insert ourselves? That's really where you want to start. And you can stay transactional for a while, but just using that customer journey as as a starting point will get you thinking more about their journey and their needs and less about your products and transactional pricing.
What role does technology and platforms, you talked about this in the book, and I agree with you that yes, there's a mindset shift and there's a language shift, but there's also a significant investment in platforms that we need to make. Could you give us a Reader's Digest version on your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think of technology the way I think about being a good writer. We aren't all great writers, but we all know how to write. And we all know how to recognize when something is written in a way that we find it easy and engaging to read, and that we understand the points. I think we all need to be literate in technology acquisition and usage, which is about writing requirements. This is what we need and what it needs to do for us and how we'll know if it's working well. And then to be able to vet technology partners, or, vet your own IT team. And, a lot of the stuff we're talking about is providing a consistent experience, setting in motion sort of processes and ongoing relationships as a way of being more leveraged. And technology is a fantastic tool to allow us to be more leveraged. So it is something that everybody needs to be conversant in and proactive in saying, how do we use technology to accelerate our growth and, more importantly, to accelerate our ability to serve our customers well.
Yes, thank you. So I'll contact Robbie afterwards, see if we can pick her brain some more and maybe make another video or get maybe an article written and kind of fill in those gaps that we got through the live, that we missed through the live feed here. So first of all, Robbie, if you can still hear us, thank you so much for being part of this podcast webinar series. Your insights are incredible. I want to encourage every single person to go out, check out her books. Both links are in the slides. Okay. So I think absolutely amazing insights displayed, piggybacked into last year's conference. In 2023, we did a reframe. The theme was creative business models for accountants. And we actually talked about your book. We recommended your book, and your work is part of the inspiration of the work that we are starting to put to help our accounting profession move into this membership. It's not helping people move into the subscription business model. It's helping people move into the membership mindset. And with the membership mindset, what we know now to be the easiest way to charge is the subscription models. But I think Robbie helped us really understand the distinction between the subscription mindset is something that we change as an industry, and the subscription is just the current way that we transact. But that could change. The way we transact could change. So anyway, if you enjoy these conversations, if you enjoy these topics, definitely check out RobbieKelmanBaxter.com. Check out her website, check out her books. I'm going to email everybody links to everything, recording, books, everything else. And lastly, I want to invite you, if you have not registered yet, to come join us in Hollywood, Florida, October 16th to the 19th, Reframe 2024, Influential Conversations for Accountants. We'll continuously discuss the concept of improving our language, improving the way we talk, improving the way we see the world, so we can reframe our professions so it can be sought after as the most creative, innovative, and forward-looking of all professions. And I invite you to join Carlos and I in this movement. Come hang out with us, reframe2024.com. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Robbie. And we'll follow up with you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon and weekend.